Ever get that feeling?
Yeah.
Like you're right on the edge of something great, something you really want, but then you kind of pull back.
Yeah, it's almost like you trip yourself up right before the finish line.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, self-sabotage. We've been digging into some fascinating insights from psychology today. Mindful mental health on Medium, Better Up, and Very Well Mind.
A lot of great research out there.
It is. And in this deep dive, we want to give you a clear understanding of why this happens and, even more importantly, what you can actually do about it.
So no more getting in your own way.
Right.
Yeah.
Think of this as your personal cheat sheet to understand those internal roadblocks.
Yeah, because when we talk about self-sabotage, people often think of it as purposely messing things up.
Right, like actively choosing to fail.
But what's so interesting and what we'll be exploring is how often these actions or thoughts that hold us back, they kind of happen without us even fully realizing it.
Just consciously almost.
Exactly. It's like those goals we set but never quite reach, or those opportunities that just slip away.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
We're going to unpack why those patterns might be playing out.
Yeah, and it's crazy how subtly it can show up. Psychology Today actually pointed out that while you might be aware of procrastinating on a big project, self-sabotage can also be totally unconscious.
I can see that.
They had this really insightful example, someone creating distance in a relationship right after a close moment.
Oh, interesting.
It's like bracing for disappointment, even if you consciously want the opposite. You ever notice something like that in your own life?
Well, yeah, and what's really fascinating is that self-sabotage often starts as self-protection. Psychology Today talked about how our brains are wired to see the familiar as safe.
Makes sense.
So when we're moving towards something new, even if it's something we want, it can trigger these self-sabotaging tendencies.
Like a safety net.
Exactly. The mind tries to pull us back to what feels comfortable, even if it's not what's best for us.
Wow. BetterUp adds to this by actually defining self-sabotage as deliberately damaging, blocking, or impairing our progress.
Right, but that deliberation isn't always a conscious choice.
That's an important distinction.
It is. And they emphasize how this can impact every part of our lives. Our relationships, our careers, even our overall well-being.
So the big question is why? Why do we do this to ourselves? What's driving these behaviors?
Well, as we've touched on, fear of the unfamiliar is a huge factor. But Better Up brings in a really interesting perspective from Dr. Judy Ho.
Okay, tell me more.
She describes this thing called the approach avoidance conflict. Basically, we get that dopamine hit, that feeling of excitement when we set a goal, but then the fear of failing to reach that goal kicks in.
Right, the what-ifs start swirling.
Exactly, and that fear can lead to avoidance. It's like our internal reward system is battling our fear response. Do you relate to that at all with your own goals?
Oh, absolutely. You get that initial burst of motivation, but then the doubts creep in. What if I fail? What if it's too hard? And suddenly staying in your comfort zone, even if it's not truly satisfying, just feels easier.
Safer, yeah. And Better Up also points to a mismatch between our core values and our actual behavior as a big cause.
Interesting. So how does that play into self-sabotage?
Well, when what we deeply believe in and what we say we want aren't reflected in our actions, that conflict can turn into self-sabotage.
That's like we're fighting ourselves.
In a way, yes. Now, Very Well Mind adds another crucial layer here. They suggest that self-sabotage can be a coping mechanism for stress and even past trauma.
So these behaviors, as harmful as they can be, are sometimes ways we've learned to deal with tough emotions or experiences.
Precisely.
It makes sense when you think about it that way. And Very Well Mind also mentioned a connection to insecure attachment styles that can develop in childhood.
Oh, right.
Can you explain how those early experiences might relate to self-sabotage later in life?
Sure. Those early relationships, especially with our parents or primary caregivers, they really shape how we view ourselves and connect with others.
Like the foundation of our emotional world.
Exactly. And if those early attachments were insecure, maybe there was inconsistency or a lack of reliable support, it can unfortunately lead to these deep-seated feelings of not being good enough.
Not worthy of love or success.
Exactly. And Very Well Mind explains how negative past relationships, even in adulthood, can have a similar impact.
Leaving us with that lingering sense of inadequacy.
Right, and that can fuel self-sabotaging behaviors in current relationships or when we're pursuing our goals.
It's almost like those old messages, even if they're not true, become ingrained and play out in our current lives.
Exactly, even when we consciously want something different.
This connects to the idea of cognitive dissonance, which both Better Up and Very Well Mind discuss. That feeling of discomfort when our beliefs clash with our
Right,
actions.
that internal conflict.
Very well.
Uh,
Mine gave a powerful example.
yeah.
Someone who wants a stable, loving marriage, but deep down doesn't believe it's possible because of their family history.
Oh, I can see how that would create a lot of internal tension.
And that underlying conflict can lead to behaviors that sabotage the very relationship they desire.
Yeah, it's like the subconscious belief overrides their conscious intention.
And the work example they gave is so relatable too. Wanting to land a big client, but feeling unworthy and then somehow accidentally messing up the opportunity.
Procrastinating or not following through.
Yeah, very well. Mine points out this is often rooted in low self-esteem.
When we hold a negative self-image, we might unconsciously act in ways that confirm those beliefs.
A self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. We sabotage our own success because deep down we don't think we deserve it.
So we've looked at what self-sabotage is and why it happens. Now let's talk about how it actually shows up in our day-to-day lives. What are some common patterns we might recognize?
Well, one of the most common is procrastination. Psychology Today, Better Up, and Very Well Mine all agree on this.
Putting things off, especially important things.
Yeah, it's classic self-sabotage,
Yeah.
often driven by fear of disappointment, fear of failure, or even surprisingly, fear of success.
Fear of success. That's interesting.
It is. Better Up links procrastination to a lack of self-confidence and perfectionism. We delay starting something because we're afraid we won't do it perfectly. Does that ring true for you at all?
Oh, the perfectionism trap. I know that one personally. Better Up and Very Well. Mind both talk about how striving for unattainable standards can actually prevent us from completing anything,
It's that all or nothing thinking. If it can't be perfect, it's not worth doing.
which ironically leads to nothing getting done.
Exactly. And Better Up mentions another common pattern, lack of moderation.
Okay, what does that look like?
Things like difficulty setting boundaries, people-pleasing to the point of exhaustion, overspending, overcommitting.
Spreading ourselves too thin.
Exactly. And they suggest this tendency to overdo it can actually mask a fear of success.
It's like staying busy to avoid reaching our full potential.
That's an interesting way to put it. Have you ever noticed yourself doing that? Taking on too much even when you know it'll lead to burnout.
Oh, all the time. It's something I'm constantly working on. Better Up also talks about running on empty, which I think a lot of people can relate to.
Neglecting our basic needs, like sleep, food, rest.
All in pursuit of our goals.
Pushing ourselves so hard that we undermine our ability to actually achieve those goals.
It's like that story of the goose that laid the golden eggs.
Exactly. You kill the goose by pushing too hard.
Better Up also talks about lack of communication as a pattern,
Resisting asking for help or speaking up about our needs.
often because of self-criticism or fear of being judged.
Yeah, fear of being found out. And this can be so damaging to our progress in our relationships.
Holding everything in just makes it worse.
It does. And it can fuel imposter syndrome, that feeling of being a fraud.
Like you're not good enough, even when you are.
Right. And because we don't communicate our struggles, those fears just grow.
Better Up gave a pretty extensive list of other self-sabotaging symptoms too. Refusing to ask for help, controlling behavior, picking fights, setting unrealistic goals, withdrawing from people, negative self-talk, undermining relationships, making excuses, neglecting self-care, even things like substance abuse and overspending.
Wow, that's a lot.
It really shows how pervasive self-sabotage can be, and Better Up points out the psychological impact of these patterns.
It can lead to feeling hopeless, believing there's something wrong with us, and these behaviors become ingrained.
A vicious cycle.
It is. Self-sabotage amplifies insecurities, drains motivation, and erodes self-esteem. And then the perceived failures make us believe those negative thoughts, which fuels more self-sabotage.
It's like digging yourself deeper into a hole.
Exactly. The self-doubt keeps the cycle going. We face a challenge, anxiety spikes, negative thoughts take over, and we act against our own best interests.
It's like we're our own worst enemy.
Sometimes it can feel that way. And when those actions damage something we value, like a relationship or a job, it reinforces those negative beliefs.
So what can we do to break free? How do we stop self-sabotaging and move towards our goals with confidence?
Well, Psychology Today and Better Up emphasize the importance of self-awareness as the first step.
Recognizing those triggers and patterns.
Exactly. Take some time to reflect on areas where things consistently go wrong.
Where we feel stuck.
Better Up suggests using this framework. I want to achieve your goal, but I keep doing the self-sabotaging behavior. What comes to mind for you when you think about that?
It's a good way to bring those unconscious tendencies to light.
It is. And Better Up also highlights understanding what negative feelings those behaviors might be masking.
Are we procrastinating because we fear failure? Are we picking fights because we fear intimacy?
Those are great examples. Once you identify those deeper emotions, psychology today suggests practicing mindfulness.
That non-judgmental awareness of our thoughts and feelings?
Right, especially when those triggers arise.
So we can observe the patterns without reacting automatically.
Exactly. It creates space to make different choices. Better Up adds that mindfulness helps develop self-compassion and break free from those cycles.
Self-compassion is so crucial. Psychology today even links it to greater happiness, wisdom, and emotional resilience,
It's about treating ourselves with kindness, especially during setbacks.
rather than harsh self-judgment.
Right. How can you be a little kinder to yourself in those moments of struggle?
It's a good question to ask ourselves. Psychology today also recommends practicing acceptance.
Accepting what's happened in the past and focusing on reacting differently now.
Reframing those internal narratives, too.
Instead of seeing challenges through fear, approach them with curiosity.
It shifts the perspective from threat to opportunity.
And psychology today emphasizes getting comfortable with the possibility of failure.
Because fear of failure is often at the root of self-sabotage.
If we avoid trying, we might think we're protecting ourselves, but we're actually limiting our potential.
Playing it safe keeps us small.
Better Up brings in the practical step of writing things out. Journaling to track patterns, triggers, and feelings.
Putting it all down on paper.
They also suggest sharing these reflections with a coach or therapist.
Getting an outside perspective.
And they point out that sometimes self-sabotage is tied to past trauma, in which case therapy can be crucial for healing.
Addressing those deeper wounds.
Better Up also emphasizes creating a plan and taking action.
So once we identify those patterns, we need to develop strategies to address them.
Make conscious rules to override sabotaging thoughts.
And take action, even small steps.
It builds momentum, reduces fear, and rebuilds self-worth.
That sense of accomplishment is so important.
It is. And seeking support from a coach or mentor can help us stay on track.
Accountability is key.
Better Up also highlights embracing incremental progress.
Not trying to change everything overnight.
Right. Focus on consistent, small steps in the right direction.
It's about the long game.
They also talk about challenging those negative thoughts that pop up,
Recognizing those automatic negative beliefs and questioning their validity.
replacing them with more balanced and encouraging self-talk.
Shifting that internal dialogue.
And then there's communicating our needs and seeking support, as Better Up suggests.
It can be hard to ask for help.
It can be, but voicing our fears to someone we trust can make them feel less overwhelming.
And sharing our goals can create accountability.
Very well. Mind also offers some targeted strategies. They echo the need to examine the root causes of self-sabotage.
Those recurring patterns linked to past experiences or beliefs.
And they specifically address procrastination, highlighting the importance of tackling the discomfort of that mismatch between our actions and our desires.
It's about facing that discomfort head on.
And they highlight developing self-regulation skills and avoiding temptations that derail our progress.
Staying focused on our goals.
For those feeling overwhelmed by big goals, Very Well Mind advises breaking them down into smaller, manageable steps.
Making it feel less daunting.
And they remind us to combat all or nothing thinking, which can lead to giving up easily.
So one setback doesn't mean total failure.
They also offer advice on stopping perfectionistic thinking. Strive for excellence, not flawlessness.
Progress over perfection.
And they remind us that self-sabotage itself takes energy.
It's a draining behavior.
So stopping those patterns can free up energy for more positive actions.
Redirecting that energy towards growth.
And finally, Very Well Mind mentions the potential value of therapy, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and dialectical behavior therapy, DBT.
For addressing negative thought patterns and managing intense emotions.
They can provide powerful tools for breaking free from self-sabotage.
So we've covered a lot today. Understanding those unconscious drives, recognizing patterns, and actively working to shift them.
It's about increasing self-awareness, practicing mindfulness and self-compassion, and implementing strategies like planning and seeking support.
Remember, becoming aware of these tendencies is the first step.
Be patient with yourself and celebrate progress, no matter how small.
And if you find yourself struggling with these patterns, don't hesitate to seek support from a mental health professional.
They can provide personalized guidance and tools.
For those of you who are young couples building a foundation for marriage, understanding self-sabotage can be particularly beneficial.
It can help you navigate those early years and beyond with more understanding and intention.
If you're interested in exploring this further, especially in the context of preparing for a healthy and thriving marriage, visit my website at www.empowerdeacleaders.com.
You can learn more about the premarital coaching services offered, which equip young couples with essential relationship skills.
You'll also find information about my ebook, Before the Vows, a comprehensive resource filled with guidance and exercises to help you prepare for a fulfilling marriage.
It's a great resource for couples starting their journey together.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into self-sabotage. We hope you gained valuable insights and actionable steps you can start using today.
Take some time to reflect on what resonated with you.
And maybe ask yourself, what's one small step you can commit to today to begin shifting a self-sabotaging pattern? We believe in you.
You've got this.